Hey friends, Pastor Bill Walden here with Build Up the Church. This is a devotional word for July 17th, 2024. We are going to take a look at a passage in Acts chapter 21. And here we see Paul. It's the ending portion of his third missionary journey. He has arrived in Jerusalem. He brought with him some Gentile believers. He is going to report to the leaders at the church in Jerusalem all that God has done in the Gentile world through the preaching of the gospel. We need to remember that the early church in Jerusalem, when it was born primarily of Jewish believers, people that had converted from Judaism to Christianity. They finally realized that Jesus was their long promised Messiah, and so they converted. But there was a lot of trouble kind of shaking off the old ways. Centuries old Judaism and all the practices and the laws and the customs, the dietary laws, the civil laws, personal hygiene laws, all designed to separate people unto God, but never completely being able to accomplish that because people would fail. But these customs were ingrained in them, and in many ways, understandably so, but could never make them completely right with God. They were kind of like a forerunner to the truth of Jesus Christ, the truth that sets people free and justifies them by faith in Christ. And so Paul is here with some his traveling companions and also some Gentile believers. God had been bringing the salvation of Jesus Christ, the gospel message to Asia, to Europe, and Paul brought with him some Gentile Christians, and they are meeting with the leaders at Jerusalem. And there's still a lot of tension, but the leaders here are very open-minded now. Some time has passed since that first council meeting in Acts chapter 15, where it was a big discussion about did Gentiles first have to become Jews and then come to Jesus through Judaism, and they determined no. So we see here Paul once again reporting to the leaders and humbly being kind of accountable to them and sharing his testimony with them. We pick up the story here, Acts chapter 21, verse 17. When we had come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and James was the leader of the Jerusalem church, and all the elders were present. And when he had greeted them, he told in detail those things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. This is the main verse for our consideration, verse 20, the first half. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord. I think it's easy for Christ followers and people of all persuasions of whatever you're following, politics or civil movements or educational movements or scientific movements or any number of things. It's easy for us to fall into a mentality of we like our tribe, we like our group, we're going to celebrate the victories and the advances of our group. We're not going to be so excited about other people's victories and advances. And you just don't see that here with the leadership in Jerusalem. As I said previously, some years before, it had been a big contention about what to do with Gentiles. God had made it clear that the message of salvation is for all nations, every tongue, every tribe, every nation. And I just love here that the leaders in Jerusalem, when they heard this news, they glorified the Lord. I don't know if they did high fives and fist bumps in the first century in Jerusalem, but there were certainly hugs and smiles and proclamations of how good God is. They celebrated the ministry success, if you will, of the Apostle Paul and the others to a people who earlier in their lifetimes, these people before they were Christians, these Jews, they didn't want anything to do with Gentiles, and how God had changed them. How God had touched their hearts and shown them that he loves the entire world. Their prejudices were gone. Not only were their prejudices gone, they were celebrating the ministry success of the Apostle Paul to the Gentiles. It just makes me think how good it is, if you're a Christian, to celebrate the successes, the gospel, the kingdom successes of other Christians, of other churches, of other, if you're a denominational Christian, of other denominations. When you see something good happening through the life of another Christian, Are you able to celebrate it? That's the model that we see in the early church. The Apostle Paul was in jail when he wrote the book of Philippians. And it's interesting that there were some people preaching Christ, apparently some hoping to stir up more problems and 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 perhaps to get Paul in deeper trouble. He was already in jail for preaching the gospel. Hard to understand how they might risk their own well-being to make it harder on him. But a lot of people didn't like Paul. They were jealous of him, or they thought that he was a bad influence on Jewish people, that kind of thing. But listen to Paul's words as he writes out of the book of Philippians. He says, "Some indeed preach Christ, even from envy and strife, some also from goodwill." And he's in jail. "The former preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerely." So using the gospel message for self-promotion, but also supposing to add affliction to my chains. And I don't know how that could have happened, except that if they were stirring up more problem, it's going to go upstream, if you will, to Paul. Verse 17, "The latter, they preach Christ out of love, knowing that I am appointed to the defense of the gospel." Here's Paul's conclusion. "What then? What should I think about this? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice, yes, and will rejoice." So Paul had that same attitude. The Jerusalem elders had rejoiced over his ministry. Paul's rejoicing over the ministry of others. It's hard to do sometimes, especially when people don't do things the way that we would. We don't like the way they do things, the way they say things, the way they spend their church money, or any number of things that just don't suit us. How broad-minded, in a kingdom sense, the leaders in Jerusalem had become. So I want to be a broad-minded Christian, not one that tolerates ungodly things, but one who can celebrate the work of Jesus through other people very different from me. I want to be a broad-minded Christian that can say, I'm really happy for how God is using you. So how about you? You know, these little devotionals here are meant to kind of, help us search our own hearts. How about you? Are you able to celebrate the victories of other Christians that are doing things in a way that you wouldn't do, and yet Christ is being preached? It's a challenging thing to think about. So there you go, some things to think about. Thanks for watching.